Hey, welcome back to my YouTube channel, my learners. For today's video, we will discuss a new topic which is the assessment for learning, assessment of learning, and lastly, the assessment as learning. In the teaching learning process, my learners, you will observe how these three prepositions are applied. And it is really important to distinguish these three forms of assessment. It's because they have different purposes in a situations. And if you are still confused when to use this assessment, and if you want more ideas from this video, then this is for you. Let's go! Ayan, pag-uusapan natin ngayon ang topic na ito. And I have a prepared presentation while I am discussing to you.
Because we can know the weakness and strength of our learners. Now, if the given choice during examination are assessment for learning, assessment of learning, and assessment as learning, then the situation is all about placement, formative, and diagnostic assessment, then please answer the assessment for learning. By the way, assessment for learning is also referred to as formative assessment. My dear viewers, please understand and memorize our keywords for assessment for learning. Our keywords are pretest, post-test, teaching learning process, given before or during instruction, and lastly recorded, but not graded. If a given situation during your examination where our keywords are seen or given, then you will know that it is an assessment for learning. Why pretest? Pretest is to find out where the students are or determine their entry knowledge or skills, so teacher knows how to adjust instruction. Did you see the relation of placement and diagnostic assessment here? I hope you can recognize that there is a relation, that is why placement and diagnostic are part of the assessment for learning. Why post-test? Post-test it is to find out if the intended learning outcome has been attained after teaching learning process. If not all students have attained it, then teacher has to apply an intervention or a remediation. That is why it is recorded but not graded. I hope you can understand now the assessment for learning. If you are still confused, please comment below so that I can assist you. Number 2 is the assessment of learning. While assessment for learning are carried out before and during instruction, now the assessment of learning are generally carried out at the end of the particular unit or a period of learning. Did you see the difference? Also, the assessment of learning becomes public, and the results in the statement or symbols about how well the student's achievement against outcomes and standard are. The result becomes public because it is not just recorded but graded. Also, assessment of learning, it is meant to assess learning for grading purposes. Again, assessment of learning done after instruction, usually referred to as the summative assessment. Now let's go to our keywords for assessment of learning. The keywords of our assessment of learning are done at the end or after of instruction and graded. Please familiarize this word, done at the end or after the instruction, unit, term, grading period, quarter, and semester. For short differences of this two, the assessment for learning done before or during of instruction, while assessment of learning done at the end or after of instruction, and it is graded. Our last form of assessment is assessment as learning. Assessment as learning is a process aimed at making students become aware of how they learn, thus becoming metacognitive. When we say metacognitive, it is thinking about your thinking. That is why it is referred to as self-assessment. In assessment as learning, the teacher's role is to develop independent learners by modeling and teaching the skills of self-assessment so that students become self-assessors. It involves goal setting, monitoring, and reflection on their work, usually through self and peer assessment. Now let's go to our keywords. Our keywords are own work, peers with the use of scoring rubrics, self-directed, independent learners, and reflection. Before we will end our video, I will give you an exercises for only 10 items to assess your learning today. Let's start. 1. Teacher Annalisa conducted an assessment to her grade for pupils, as seems to describe the standard reached by the learner at the end of instruction. Which form of assessment is being described? A. Formative assessment. B. Diagnostic assessment. C. Assessment for learning. D. Assessment of learning. The answer is D. 2. The class of teacher Annalisa was given a pretest on the empowerment technologies. She used the results as the basis for teaching the lesson. Which of the following best describes assessment in this context? A. Assessment as learning. B. Assessment for learning. C. Summative assessment. D. Assessment of learning. The answer is B. 3. Which assessment leads students to become self-directed and independent learners? A. Assessment for learning. B. Assessment of learning. C. Assessment as learning. D. Both A and B. The answer is C. 4. Complete this analogy. Formative assessment, assessment for learning. Summative assessment. A. Assessment of learning. B. Assessment with learning. C. Assessment as learning. D. Assessment in learning. The answer is A. 5. Which assessment is used to determine grade of students? A. Formative assessment. B. Assessment of learning. C. Assessment for learning. D. Assessment as learning. The answer is B. 6. Teacher Annalisa sees to it that she checks for the understanding as she teaches to ensure that every student can follow the lesson. With what form of assessment is teacher Annalisa? Assessment of learning. B. Assessment as learning. C. Assessment for learning. D. Assessment with learning. answer is B. Congratulations, my viewers. God bless you.